The stars outside the Marlow seemed colder now. Elias Vance sat in the cockpit, staring at the empty void ahead. The last transmission from the Dominion Council still echoed in his mind, matter closed. It was a lie, a fragile piece built on a single thread. But it had worked. For now. Yet, despite the apparent victory, Elias felt the weight of the truth pressing down on him. Humanity had been inserted into this galaxy, a species that didn't belong, an anomaly in the very fabric of existence. But who had placed them here? Why? And most importantly, who else knew? The truth was out there, and it was coming for them. The shifting tide. The first hint of trouble came from Korr'Xen. The Krellian had been suspiciously quiet, his hulking form now a frequent presence at Elias's side. But Elias could tell something was off. There was a tension to the way Korr'Xen moved, a restlessness that betrayed more than he was letting on. Something's wrong, Elias muttered as Korr'Xen stood near the airlock, scanning the distant stars. Korr'Xen's vertical pupils flicked toward him, his deep voice low. I know. Elias frowned. What do you mean? The Dominion doesn't just ignore things. They wait for things to evolve into threats. But they never forget. He turned to face Elias, his reptilian gaze intense. They know you lied. Elias's heart skipped. How? Korr'Xen's jaw clenched. They watch. They've been watching since the beginning. They know you were hiding something about humanity. A chill ran down Elias's spine. But it wasn't just the Dominion that concerned him. The architects. The silent designers. They had already seen the anomaly humanity represented, and sooner or later, they would come. The summoning. The storm arrived quietly. Elias had just finished calibrating the Marlow's navigation systems when a signal burst through, untraceable, unbreakable. It came as a whisper, too soft to ignore. A voice, cold and distant, resonating with something older than the stars themselves. Elias Vance. Human anomaly. We are the architects. The transmission, though distant, seemed to fill the entire cockpit. Elias's pulse quickened. He knew this was the moment, the point of no return. You are not meant to be here, the voice continued. The fabric of reality has been disrupted. Your species was never designed for this existence. You will come to us, or we will extract you. The transmission cut off. Elias felt a surge of panic, but he fought it down. The architects weren't giving him a choice. We're not going to let this go, are we? He muttered, staring at the dead space outside the viewport. No, Elias. Not yet. A meeting in the void. 3 hours later, the Marlow was docked at an unknown location, a silent asteroid in the middle of the void, far from any known space lanes. The comms had gone silent, and no signals were coming in. It was a trap. Korr'Xen was already waiting when Elias boarded the loading bay, his eyes narrowed. They've called you, haven't they? Elias nodded. The architects. Korr'Xen hissed through his teeth. You realize what this means? Elias ran a hand through his hair. I didn't have a choice. They're coming for us. Just then, the asteroid's surface seemed to shimmer, a wave of distortion rippling through the void. A vast shadow filled the space before them, something unnatural, something impossibly large, like a city wrapped in darkness, hovering at the edges of reality. The architects had arrived. The arrival of the architects. The vast presence loomed in front of them, its shape ungraspable, an enigma built from shifting geometries and reality-bending surfaces. Then, a voice, not from speakers, not from anywhere physical, but from everywhere at once, echoed through Elias's mind, so powerful that it shook his bones. Elias Vance. Humanity. You are not part of the system. Elias stood frozen, eyes wide. No, we're not. No, the voice paused, as if considering the very nature of humanity. But you are here. And that cannot be allowed. A figure, impossibly tall, materialized within the shimmering distortion. It had no face, no form that resembled any known species, It was more like an idea made flesh, something too vast to be fully comprehended. Its presence pressed against Elias's mind, heavy, suffocating. You will return to the fold. You will submit to the architect's design. Elias gritted his teeth. We don't belong here, but we're not going anywhere. You can't just erase us. The figure's presence seemed to flicker, as if it were considering this statement. That is the purpose. The correction is inevitable. You will cease to exist as you are. The order will be restored. The words hit Elias like a physical blow. His heart pounded in his chest. You think you can just undo humanity? Because you're afraid of what we represent? Afraid? The figure's voice echoed with a mockery that chilled Elias to the core. We are not afraid. We are the creators. You are a mistake that must be corrected. Elias's mind raced. No. Not this time. Not without a fight. He turned to Call, his eyes steely. We don't go down like this. Not without taking a stand. Call nodded. I've never been afraid of standing tall against the system. With that, Elias stepped forward. We're not an error. We are humanity. And we're not going to let you erase us. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, the architects spoke, their voice resonating through the void once again. Then prepare, Elias Vance. Prepare for the trial of your existence. And with that, the battle for humanity's survival began. The architects' vast presence loomed over the asteroid, their shifting, incomprehensible form warping reality itself. Elias Vance stood at the edge of his ship's loading bay, staring into the void where an intelligence older than the Dominion, older than history itself, had summoned him for judgment. His fingers twitched near his sidearm, not that a weapon would do anything here. Behind him, Call shifted uneasily, his scaled hands tightening into fists. This is madness, Vance. Elias exhaled. Feels like a Tuesday to me. A pulse of energy rippled through the space around them. The void shimmered, folding inward, and suddenly, they were no longer on the asteroid. The court beyond reality. Elias found himself standing in a chamber that did not exist. It was neither light nor dark, neither cold nor warm. The space defied definition. There was no ceiling, no floor, just an infinite stretch of shifting patterns and colors, a place built beyond the limits of time. And at the center of it all stood the architects. They were not beings. Not in the way Elias understood. They had no faces, no true forms, only immense, flowing structures of energy, shifting geometries that bent perception itself. Their very presence pressed against his mind, forcing thoughts into shapes they had never taken before. And then, they spoke. Human anomaly, you stand before the architects of reality. Your presence has disrupted the order. Your existence is an error. You will be corrected. Elias gritted his teeth. We're not an error. We're alive. The space around him hummed with unseen energy, like the universe itself had reacted. Incorrect. You were introduced into this system without design, without purpose. Your kind is neither bound by the laws of this reality, nor subject to the patterns of its life cycles. You are an anomaly, and anomalies must be resolved. Elias clenched his fists. And what does resolved mean? A pause. Then, the architects spoke a word that made his blood run cold. Erasure. Call hissed behind him, stepping forward. You mean to wipe out an entire species because it doesn't fit your rules? The architects pulsed. Correction is necessary. The balance must be restored. Elias forced himself to stay calm. If you wanted us gone, we'd be gone already. But you brought me here. That means you're giving me a choice. Silence. Then, the answer came. The system must be tested. A sound like thunder echoed in the endless void. The space around Elias shifted, reshaping itself into something else. A battlefield. The trial begins. Elias and Call now stood on what looked like a ruined planet, its cracked surface floating in an endless abyss. The air was thick with electric charge, and in the distance, shapes began to emerge, vast, shifting constructs of the architect's making. The architect's voice boomed across the expanse. "We will judge your species through a trial of existence. If you survive, you will be allowed to remain. If you fail, humanity will be erased." Elias's mouth was dry. "And what exactly are we fighting?" The ground trembled. The air split apart. And then they came. Figures, hundreds of them, descending from the shifting sky, not the architects themselves, but something else. Perfectly formed, impossibly fast. A new type of quiet blade, engineered to kill what the first wave could not. Elias's stomach dropped. The architects had built a new weapon, one that could kill humans. Khal bared his fangs. "You had to open your damn mouth, didn't you?" Elias pulled his pistol and chambered a round. "Wouldn't be me if I didn't." Then the first wave of enemies attacked. The battle for humanity. Elias moved before he thought. The first quiet blade lunged toward him, faster than anything organic should be. He dodged left, firing at its center mass. The bullet passed straight through. No impact. No damage. The creature didn't even slow down. They were untouchable. Elias cursed. "Khal, we need a new plan." The Korr'Xen warrior had already engaged, using sheer brute force to swat an attacker aside. But even that did nothing. The quiet blade adapted mid-motion, shifting like liquid metal, reforming instantly. Elias gritted his teeth. The architects weren't just testing humanity's strength. They were proving that humans didn't belong. No. Not like this. Elias holstered his pistol. "It's not about fighting them." Khal ducked under a strike, barely avoiding decapitation. "What the hell do you mean?" Elias's mind worked faster than ever before. "They're testing whether we can survive, not whether we can win." He looked at the shifting battlefield. "This isn't a fight. It's a puzzle." Khal growled. "You better start solving it." Elias's eyes darted across the battlefield, analyzing patterns. The enemies weren't attacking at random. They moved in perfect, synchronized harmony, a system, a machine. And that meant there had to be a flaw. Then he saw it. A break in the pattern. A single moment, every 30 seconds, where the movement of the attackers aligned in a way that created an opening. It was tiny. Impossible to see unless you were watching for it. But Elias saw it. "Khal. On my mark, move left, exactly 2 meters." Khal didn't hesitate. As Elias counted down in his head, the quiet blade swarmed toward them again. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Now. They both dove left. And the quiet blade missed. For the first time since the fight started, the architect's constructs hesitated. Elias grinned. "That's right. You're not the only ones who can adapt." The battlefield began to shift again, but Elias wasn't done. If there was one flaw in the system, there had to be more. And if he could break the system, humanity could win. The battlefield was a twisted mockery of reality, constantly shifting, constantly changing. Elias could feel the pulse of the architect's power reverberating through his very bones. It was like fighting in the heart of a storm, unpredictable, suffocating, and merciless. But Elias wasn't backing down. Not this time. "You think you can break us?" he muttered, eyes narrowing. "You think we don't belong?" The quiet hum of the architect's presence filled the void around them. The battlefield had stopped shifting for a moment, but it wouldn't last. The constructs, those twisted, near-immortal entities, remained at the edges of Elias's perception, biding their time, awaiting their next order. "We're not an error," Elias repeated, almost to himself. "We're a species that adapted when it shouldn't have. We're the unexpected force that should have been wiped out, but wasn't. We survived." His thoughts were interrupted by Khal's voice, low and rough, cutting through the tense air. "I don't know how much longer we can keep dodging. These things, they learn faster than we can move. Elias turned to him, eyes alight with resolve. Then we force them to keep learning. The Korr'Xen growled, his reptilian gaze flicking toward the swirling horizon of the shifting battlefield. You have a plan? I always do, Elias replied, the confidence in his voice cutting through the uncertainty. We've been reacting. They've been dictating the terms of this fight. It's time we take control. The architect's judgment. Suddenly, the atmosphere around them thickened. The air itself seemed to crackle, as if the architects themselves were watching with unblinking eyes. Their presence hung over the battlefield like a dark cloud, suffocating, waiting. The voice of the architects filled the void once more, louder and colder than before. You have survived the first trial, Elias Vance. But survival does not guarantee existence. Your species was never meant to be. Elias clenched his fists, standing tall. We weren't meant to be, by your design. The voice of the architects reverberated with ancient authority. Your continued existence is a failure of the system. The trial was meant to bring order. You have disrupted it. Your survival is a mistake. Elias's gaze sharpened. Your system is flawed. Flawed? The architect's response came, rich with disbelief. We are the creators. The designers. We control the order of the universe. You are an anomaly, a disruption. No. We're a possibility, Elias fired back. You see us as a mistake, but we've proven that we can adapt. We can evolve. The system you control can be bent, manipulated. And that's why you're afraid of us. The architect's silence was deafening. For a moment, there was no sound, no hum, no pulse. Just the threatening stillness of an eternity stretched across an infinite void. Then came their final response, colder than anything Elias had ever felt. Then you will face the final trial. The trial of choices. The battlefield dissolved once again, this time into something far more familiar, the stark, sterile interior of a vast, endless chamber. Elias felt an immediate wave of vertigo as the space warped, becoming a giant arena where the rules of reality itself seemed malleable. At the far end of the room, the architects appeared, their forms shifting like liquid, only now their presence was felt in a much more personal way. They didn't just manipulate reality, they were reality, a horrifying fusion of thought, matter, and raw cosmic energy. Elias was no longer just fighting against constructs. This was it. The ultimate test. Elias Vance, the voice echoed, its tone impossibly calm. You have survived, you have adapted. Now, you will be tested. You will be forced to make a choice. A vast hologram materialized in front of him, two paths stretched out before him. The first path, the architects continued, leads to your destruction, your species' annihilation, the erasure of your existence from the timeline. The second path, they added, leads to your species' survival. But at a cost. To secure humanity's place, you must give up your own. Elias's heart pounded. This wasn't a battle. It wasn't a puzzle. This was a decision. And it had no easy answer. Call stepped forward, his eyes hard with fury. You can't let them do this, Vance. But Elias didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. To secure humanity's future, to save them, Elias would have to give up everything. His life, his future, everything. He'd have to make the ultimate sacrifice. What if they're lying? Call's voice was raw. What if this is just another trick? Elias didn't look at him. His gaze was fixed on the two paths. The first one, the path of destruction, was an inevitable end. But the second offered humanity's survival. But at what cost? His mind raced. He thought of Lily, of Nana, the innocent faces of humanity. They deserved to be free. They deserved to exist. But at what price? Was he willing to be the one to bear that cost? I won't let them erase us, Elias whispered to himself, more sure than ever. I won't let them win. He turned to Call. I'm doing this for humanity. Even if I have to sacrifice myself to save them, it's worth it. Khal didn't say anything. He didn't need to. With a final, steady breath, Elias stepped toward the second path. The path of sacrifice. The price of survival. As Elias took his first step onto the path, the architect's presence intensified. A voice, this time quieter, almost sorrowful, spoke. Are you certain? The price of this choice cannot be reversed. Humanity will live, but you will never see its future. Your name will fade from history. You will be forgotten. Elias didn't falter. I've made my choice. As his feet touched the glowing ground of the second path, the chamber around him collapsed. The architects didn't fight him. They didn't stop him. They watched as Elias made his final sacrifice. The last thing Elias saw before the light consumed him was the image of humanity's future, a future that would survive because he chose to let go. The light consumed Elias Vance in an explosion of energy, a final burst of brilliance that shattered the void and bent the very fabric of existence. His body dissolved into the light, becoming part of the stream of raw power that surged across the universe. He felt it, the pull, the sacrifice. It was like being torn apart and remade all at once, his consciousness flickering and stretching, slipping beyond the boundaries of time. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it ended. Elias was gone. The architect's silent judgment. For a moment, nothing moved. The battlefield, the grand arena, was silent, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The architects stood still, their immense, incomprehensible forms unchanged. But there was a shift in the air, a subtle change. Their cold, godlike presence receded slightly. It was as if they were processing the decision Elias had made, as if the weight of it had registered somewhere deep within their ancient minds. Humanity's future is uncertain, the architects finally spoke, their voice reverberating like the ringing of distant bells. But you have passed the test, Elias Vance. Your species will survive. Your sacrifice will be remembered. Even if you are forgotten. And just like that, the energy that had once consumed Elias's being began to disperse, scattering across the stars. The architect's presence faded, and the false battlefield dissolved into nothing. But something remained, something far more significant than mere memory. The path for humanity had been carved. A world without a savior. On Earth, life continued as it always had. The sun rose, casting its golden rays over the vast cities, the sprawling plains, and the oceans that stretched to infinity. Humanity carried on, unaware of the silent struggle that had unfolded above them, the sacrifice of one man that had ensured their survival. But they would never know the name Elias Vance. To them, he was a whisper in the wind, a shadow that never fully materialized. No monuments would bear his name, no memorial would mark his grave. He was gone, lost to history in the very moment his choice had sealed their fate. Yet his absence was not felt in the way one might expect. There were no tears, no sorrowful cries echoing across the globe. There was only the quiet hum of life continuing, and with it, a subtle, but undeniable change. Humanity's resilience was no longer just a trait, it was a destiny. They had passed the architect's trial. They had earned their place. The architect's watch. Deep in the far reaches of the galaxy, far beyond the known stars, the architects stood. In the unchanging expanse of space, their forms lingered like shadows in the dark, their minds observing with a quiet, analytical detachment. They were not gods, nor were they cruel. They were the architects of possibility, creators of systems, designers of order. And they had watched. For the first time in eons, they felt something stir within themselves, something that was neither calculation nor cold logic. It was a curiosity, an ancient feeling that had long since faded from their kind. Humanity, will they thrive? The question hung in the air, unanswered. But deep within the heart of the architects, one truth had become undeniable, the anomaly they had tried to erase had won. Legacy without a name. Back on Earth, people went about their lives, living the future Elias had given them, unaware of the battle that had raged above them. Wars were fought and won, nations rose and fell, and the stars themselves bore witness to the growth of a species that had defied its makers. But there were whispers. The story of the forgotten hero. An old tale, passed down in secret by those who had somehow learned the truth. Stories of a man who had made the ultimate sacrifice, who had saved the human race from the brink of destruction, a name, spoken only in hushed tones. It was said that Elias Vance's final act had left behind a mark, a spark, that would ignite something in humanity. His choice had not just been about survival, it had been about evolution, the evolution of a species that could no longer be controlled, a species that would grow beyond its creators. And in the quiet corners of the world, far from the eyes of those in power, a new movement began to stir. A quiet rebellion, not of weapons or violence, but of ideas. They called themselves the Children of the Spark. They were the ones who whispered Elias's name in the dark, who carried the weight of his sacrifice in their hearts, who believed that humanity could be more than just an experiment. They were the ones who understood the true price of survival. And though the architects never looked back, though they never acknowledged the possibility that humans might one day surpass their design, something had changed. Something profound. Something that could not be erased. A new dawn. And so, as the sun rose over Earth once more, casting its light on a world that had unknowingly been saved, humanity's future was born anew. The legacy of Elias Vance was not a monument. It was not a stone carved with his name, or a statue erected in his honor. It was something far more powerful, a silent revolution, a shift in the very heart of humanity itself. Because humanity had learned to adapt. And in the end, they had proven that the architects were wrong. They didn't need a name. They didn't need the recognition. They didn't need anything but the fire in their hearts to move forward, to build a future that would never be erased again. They were human. And they would survive. The end. This is where the story wraps up. Humanity has earned its place, not because of grand monuments or grand gestures, but because of resilience, adaptability, and the quiet but unbreakable spirit of survival. Elias's sacrifice becomes the bedrock of the future, not through recognition but through the legacy of what he gave.